The paths penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teachings.
In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understandings of the teachings and practice, it is offered as a practice of Dhamma paramita. Dhamma is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this is done without any expectation when the opportunity arises. And those who share their teachings at Great Tree do so on a Dhamma basis, so please support their practice by giving what you can, which you can do on the website at greattreetemple.org. The donate section. Our speaker today is Rev Teijo Munnich. Daiju Teijo means Great Tree Right Stillness. Reverend Teijo is a disciple and Dharma heir of Rev Dainin Katagiri. She studied with him from 1975 until his death in 1990, and she received formal training at Hokyoji in Minnesota, Tassajara in California, and Hosshinji Sodo in Obama, Japan. Reverend Munnich was ordained as a Zen priest in 1981, and in 1983 she began to envision a practice center and community, which at its heart is a residential practice for women, and this came to be Great Tree. And this month, Teijo has been holding a study group focusing on the Mountains and Water Sutra. A couple of weeks ago, we got a Mountains Dharma talk, and today's Dharma talk is Waters. So, welcome, Teijo.
Oh, I forgot to bring the book. I was going to show the book. It's a commentary by Shohaku Okumura, who had done translation of Dogen for many years, 30 or 40 years, and then decided to start to give commentaries based on the commentaries that have been written about Dogen's writings over the several hundred years since Dogen's death. And so the Mountains and Waters Sutra is a fascicle of the Shobogenzo, which is, the Shobogenzo is a body of writings by Dogen Zenji. The monk who brought, he was Japanese, but he went to China and brought Soto Zen practice back to Japan, and it's his teachings that inspire the Soto Zen school. So this sutra is divided into different sections. The first is the introduction, the second is mountains, and the third is waters. And I think the fourth is mountains and waters, right? And what did he say the fifth one? He put a fifth one in there. I can't remember what that was. So anyway, it's divided into 5 sections. This second's asked me to confirm my speaking language. Must be AI hanging in there. Anyway, so when I first read this chapter on water, I thought, oh, this is nice. It just really, many things in it resonated for me. But then when I started to think about talking about it, it's like I don't know how to talk about it. And there's so many different things that he talks about in here that I want to kind of share. But in a sense, what he's doing is he's taking lines from the sutra and discussing them from his perspective. Okumura is doing that, and it feels to me like he keeps going back to the same thing. the other night we were reading the first chapter. I guess we're on the introduction in the study group. We're taking it in very small chunks and reading it ahead and then reading it together. And when we were reading it together, what I found myself doing is just getting pulled in, and then just my mind would go off on something, and then I'd get pulled in, and then my mind would go off on something. And I keep saying, oh, wait, and Shohaku himself says when he, at the beginning of the book, when he starts his commentary, that the way that we understand this teaching of Dogen and this practice, it doesn't work if we try to do it with our intellect. And going in and out, partially it was just my mind not being able to connect and going off, but partially it was my mind trying to understand, trying to get it. And he starts out the chapter by quoting a section from Dogen and then talking about it, starting to talk. And when I read this quote from Dogen from the Mountains and Waters Sutra, the very first time I thought, I can't understand this. And so I felt a little upset. And I started reading what Shohaku had to say about it. And he said, first thing he said is, do you understand this? And I thought, oh, good, he's going to explain it. And then he goes on to talk about how really, if you try to understand it, you can't understand it. Because that's not what Dogen is pointing to. This is not what he's trying to awaken in us. So our intellect can't get this. But if we keep making the effort of just reading it and not saying, well, I don't understand this, so I'm going to go read something I do understand, because I want Buddhism to be more relatable, which, that's good and that's nice, but Dogen takes us a little deeper than that. And so the first thing I thought about when I was thinking about talking about water was I thought, oh, I have such a relationship with water because I grew up in Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, which is actually more than that. But then I thought, it's not really just about 10,000 lakes. It's about the millions of springs that come up from the land in Minnesota and make those lakes. And even, the Mississippi River goes right through Minneapolis. And we had some friends that had a home on the Mississippi River because they were canoe racers. And so we spent a lot of time walking along the side of the river, and all along the side of the Mississippi River are springs. And we had springs within walking distance of our house. We used to go and get spring water because we didn't like the city water. We used to walk out to the spring and fill it. And the springs also represent for me a sense of community, because when you go to the spring, everybody kind of waits their turn and everybody's kind of chatting. The spring we went to was out in the woods. And so you're kind of out in the woods, sitting around the spring and talking about everything. So, I have this, and I learned to swim in lakes. I learned actually to swim in the Mississippi River, but, I did canoeing. So water for me is just, when I think of it, it makes me happy. And one of the criteria that I had for finding a place for Great Tree was that it have a creek on the property. And we do. So, that's how I was thinking about it. And in a way, it kind of connects to what Dogen is saying. Because what water does for me is it helps me to be present. When I was in my 20s and I was having all kinds of dramas, emotional dramas, I would go to a certain lake and just sit by the lake. And now I go to the Laurel River and just sit by the Laurel River. And there's something about water and maybe the movement of it, particularly in the mountains, water moves, that has a cleansing effect, or has the effect of helping me to recognize how things change all the time as the water moves. But Dogen discusses water. I'm reading now from Shohaku's commentary. But this water is not simply the water flowing in the river or the water we drink every day. He talks about water as a metaphor of Buddha Dharma. Buddha means awakened being, and Dharma is really pointing to reality, which is this moment, which we can't even say this moment because by the time we say it, this moment is past. So that's how swiftly life moves. In the commentaries on San Sui Kyo, San means mountain, Sui means water, Kyo means, what is Okyo? Chanting or words about or speaking. Okyo is chanting of the sutras in Japanese. So San Suiko, Mountains and Waters Sutra. By Soto Zen scholar monks, the water is called, in the commentaries on San Suikyo by Soto Zen scholar monks, this water is called Hoshu Sui, or Dharma nature water. Dharma nature is a translation of Sanskrit word dharmata. You've probably heard that word dharmata, the way all beings really are. And maybe you've heard the word tathagata. Tathagata is a being who lives in what is called thusness, but another way to say that is as it isness. So a tathagata is a being that is really living in the present moment all the time. And there's also a word buddhata, Buddha nature. This means the same thing, the way things are. And dharmakaya, or dharma body. And dharma body is interesting to me. It started out that it referred to the Dharma, meaning the teachings of the Buddha. But now it's Dharma, and Dharma body is talking about things as they really are. Not our diluted interpretation of them. When we experience something, then the next thing is we try to understand it. And as soon as we try to understand it, we've lost that moment. That's why I often say that in Shikantaza practice, which is just said, when we notice, oh, our mind is really busy, or oh, I'm obsessing about this, or oh, I'm angry. When we notice it, that moment, that moment is a moment of letting go, and it's a moment of really being present. Because when we let go, then we are within the true experience of life. And I have, after doing shikantaza now for 50 years, I have discovered that what it is it feels like nothing is happening. And Dogen talks about that in the Jiji Uzamai. Everything, it's being within everythingness, shunyata. But at the same time, I say all beings are speaking to us. All beings are helping us to experience what life is in this moment. So at that point, we're letting go of our interpretations. Of course, very quickly after that, even on the cushion, we say, well, what was that? And we start to define and interpret our experience. And often what we do, and we don't even, I think, notice that we're doing this, at least for a long time, is that we make a judgment. Was that experience real, or was that experience not real? And because that experience is often unfamiliar to us, particularly when we're just starting out, we just dismiss it as not real. And so we don't put any value on that experience itself. And maybe we say, well, what's the point of sitting and facing? But if we continue to sit and face the wall, something happens to us. And what happens is that again and again, we notice these things that our mind attaches to. We notice these things that our mind deems real, which we recognize, oh my gosh, that's not real. That's just my mind. And at that moment of recognition, that's letting go. And at that moment of letting go, that's experiencing reality as it really is. And the longer we do this practice, the more we experience that. And this is basically what Dogen is pointing to. Sorry, I got to make my print bigger. It's kind of small. And so there's this word hosho sui, which is translated Dharma, nature, water. Ho means Dharma. So Dharma, nature, water. So this is the water, apparently, that Dogen is talking about, Hosho sui. Hosho, Dharma, nature, is a translation of the Sanskrit word dharmata, the way all beings really are. And that's what I was just talking about. In his commentary on Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra, that's the Heart Sutra, Nagarjuna is about 3rd century writer who wrote about emptiness. And that's what a lot of people refer to when they're talking about emptiness. He was writing about emptiness. He said, Dharma nature is the reality of all things. When the ignorance and delusions in our mind are replaced and we see things with undefiled, genuine insight, we can see the true nature of all things. This is called Dharma nature. The quote, nature refers to truth. All living beings are bound because of mistaken view and liberated by true insight. So this mistaken view is our attachment, our mental attachment to our understanding of how things are. This is called, he calls it mental view, and it's called delusion in Buddhism. That's what delusion is pointing to. When ignorance and delusions in our mind, ignorance means when we ignore. And I often like to tell about the way it was described in the book Dawn of the Dhamma. He describes it, ignorance, as the way that the captain of the Titanic processed the information that there was a huge, dangerous iceberg ahead. And he reasoned that the Titanic was indestructible. So he bypassed maybe his original thought, which is maybe we should change our course. And we do that all the time. We call it second guessing. So ignorance is that tendency to ignore the truth in favor of how we want things to be. And that's also how I describe delusion. So he says, when the ignorance and delusions in our minds are replaced and we see things with undefiled, genuine insight that hasn't been messed with by our mental discrimination, we can see that the true nature of all things. That is called Dharma nature. The nature refers to truth. All living beings are bound because of mistaken view and liberated by true insight. Dogen wrote a fascicle of Shobogenso entitled Hosho. That's Dharma. What did he say? Dharma nature. Hosho. That Dharma nature is not something abstract, but our concrete practice and all things we encounter in our practice. Dharma nature is simply eating morning gruel, eating noon rice, and drinking tea. We've started a practice of drinking tea together here at Great Tree. And sometimes when people come and we have time, we sit down and have a cup of tea. Or before we start work period, we sit down and have a cup of tea. And somehow I picked that up when I was in Japan, of course, because anytime you go anywhere, someone sits you down and gives you a cup of tea. But my feeling from that is that it's our chance to kind of be present with each other, take a deep breath, and then whatever we do next, we start with a fresh spirit. And this is what happens when we drink tea together. So Dharma nature is simply eating morning gruel. This is Dogen. Eating noon rice and drinking tea. In the Soto Zen tradition, in the receiving of the precept ceremony, before the officiant gives the precepts, she purifies the recipient by sprinkling water on the person's head. That water is also called Hosho Sui. This Dharma water refers to the wisdom that sees all beings as they are. The water is Dharma nature, that is the self, the teachers, the scriptures, and all other things we are living and working together. The point is, how can we live and practice together with other people and things without making them into nama rupa? Nama rupa is, it's part of the 6 kind of stages of our mind that take us back to suffering. It's like a cycle of, it's called the cycle of dependent origination. This nama rupa is literally its name and form. When we name things, when we give something a substantial form, a real form, when we see something as real, this is called nama rupa, and this is attachment. Immediately we attach. Shohaku, one time in a lecture of his, he said, if we have a dictionary and we look at the dictionary, we just look at a page in the dictionary, we don't attach to anything. But if we look at one word, immediately there's attachment there, you know? And what that says to me is how quickly our mind attaches to something as real, you know, because we want something to hold on to. Life is moving so quickly. Dogen Zenji says there are 6,500,099,480 moments in a day. Now, you know, if you break that down and divide it into hours and minutes, your mind becomes completely dismantled. I've tried to do that. And Katagiri Roshi says about this that that's what Dogen is trying to do. He's trying to break down our way of thinking about time so that we just are being time. And Dogen Zenji writes about that, so that our being and time are the same thing, that there is no definition of time that is definite. You know, and you can tell that by that. We've got the lunar years and we've got the kind of years, the way we define the years. I don't remember what it's called, but, you know, and just the way that we try to categorize time, we really can't. But time is being, what Dogen says. So the water is Dharma nature, that is the self. The self, meaning the self being everythingness, being part of everythingness, that we don't exist. Teijo does not exist separate from the rest of life. Nothing exists separate from the rest of life. This is what I call everythingness. Usually the translation is emptiness, but it's really, emptiness is pointing to the non-substantial nature of everything. And so it's really everythingness. The point is, how can we live and practice together with other people and things without making them into namarupa? In other words, attachment, some form of attachment or something that we see as real, that's unchanging. You know, one of the things that I have most appreciated about this practice is that I've come to really recognize that things change. And so of course, when it's something I like, I'd rather that it didn't change. But when it's something I don't like, it's very nice to know that it can change, because there's a tendency, I think, of us humans to get caught in this, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. And there is really no such thing as failure. Failure is just things not happening in the way that we had wanted or expected or thought they should be. But when we see, oh, I'm thinking of myself as failing, but it's not really failure, it's just this moment that is not lining up with how I thought it should be, we can see that it's not going to remain in that way, that we don't have to stay in that place. Sometimes our mind keeps us in that place, and then we get depressed. Dogen says that the water as Dharma nature is beyond conceptual dichotomies. And this is how Dogen says it. Water is neither strong nor weak, neither wet nor dry, neither moving nor still, neither cold nor hot, neither being nor non-being, neither delusion nor enlightenment. Frozen, it is harder than diamond. Who could break it? Melted, it is softer than milk. Who could break it? So Shohaku says about that. Dogen is discussing the reality of our life beyond the dualities that are the product of our mind, of the contact between our sense organs and their objects, So when he was talking about seeing the words on the page, he's not just talking about seeing as a source of attachment, but talking about all the sense organs as sources of attachment. So the sense organs are, of course, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body. But in Buddhism, mind is also a sense organ. So the object of our sight is what we are seeing. The object of our hearing is what we hear. The object of our smelling is, what we smell. Though all of those things are things we attach to, and the object of mind is thoughts. And so all of our organs, all of our sense organs attach to our sources of attachment. And if we aren't aware of that, it causes suffering for us. This isn't saying that it's possible to constantly be aware, because we live in a dualistic world. The world, part of our reality is we have to give time and space to things in order to function. We have to give time to eat in order to stay alive. We have to give time to cook in order to eat. Whatever we do, in order to eat, we have to have a source of food. So we have to have some order. And it's dualistic. But that is not the only reality and only aspect of reality in which we as humans live. There's also the reality of none of that is substantial, none of that lasts, none of that is real. So somehow we have to come to terms with both of those things. And so there's this constant kind of moving back and forth. I was talking about when we were trying to read those sections the other night, and the other morning in the study group, we were all talking about how we were trying to understand it with our mind, and then being pulled in by the no mind aspect, not letting our mind try to take over the understanding. So Dogen is discussing the reality of our life beyond the dualities that are the product of our mind, of the contact between our sense organs and their objects. Water doesn't have any fixed self-nature, so it changes in many ways. Sometimes it's wet, of course, but sometimes it's very dry. When the temperature is very low, for instance, snow is not wet at all. It is more like flour. Sometimes water moves, sometimes it doesn't. The ice at the North and South poles might be millions of years without moving, and yet it might melt if global warming changes. Global weather changes. What time is it? It's 10:41. Maybe I'll ask you if you have any comments about this or any questions. I can continue. I have a lot here. I think.
Um, yes. Oh, I'm echoing. When you were talking about, of course, we live in a dualistic world and we have to live in it. And about preparing food, you have to plan it, you have to buy it, grow it, whatever. And I understand about, well, I try to understand about emptiness, but I think you made a comment about food not being real, and that just struck me. Can you talk more about that, please?
Maybe I didn't mean it wasn't real. Maybe I meant it wasn't substantial. I mean, food is a good example, because even if we don't eat it, it goes through the cycle of birth and death, right? And if we eat it, we've cut its life, and we've taken what's left of its life and put it into our bodies, so it changes its form. So it doesn't have a permanent is what I should have said. It doesn't have a permanent nature. And it's really easy to see with something that's growing, flowers or fruit. But, other things like, well, in buildings, you can see it in buildings. You can see from what we're doing here at Great Tree right now, that buildings don't have a permanent nature. We're replacing the deck. We're putting in a new septic. Lots of things going on here. Yeah, yay. But yeah, I mean, it's just pointing to. I was just trying to say that it doesn't have a permanent nature, and yet, and even like if you think about growing food in the garden, you can't predict from year to year when to put it in, how it's going to grow, how it's going to do that year, because everything changes in the garden all the time. And of course, there's the weather, and there's, I was just at the market the other day, and I said to one of the vendors, I said, well, isn't it strawberry season? She said, yeah. She says, usually we have a lot of strawberries, but this year the hurricane affected that, and so we don't have any strawberries this year, but next year we'll have some, so this thinking that things are always going to be in a certain way, and then we get disappointed, we get discouraged by it, it causes suffering for us. And that was the point that I was trying to make. Does that respond to your question?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else? Shall I continue? If you're trying to wrap your mind around this and understand what's being said here, forget it. So the next thing he talks about, this section is called Water Studies Water. And Dogen Zenji says, this being the case, goes back, I'm going to go back and read what it says before that. Water is neither strong nor weak, neither wet nor dry, neither moving nor still, neither cold nor hot, neither being nor non-being, neither delusion nor enlightenment. Frozen, it's harder than diamond, who could break it? Melted, it's softer than milk, who could break it? So Dogen goes on to say, this being the case, we cannot doubt the many virtues realized by water. We should study the occasion when the water of the 10 directions is seen in the 10 directions. In the commentary, when the water of the 10 directions is seen in the 10 directions means that we see water not only from our tunnel vision, but beyond our particular karmic point of view. Karmic point of view is talking about our tendency to make things real with our minds. It's a karmic point of view is really our deluded point of view, and our karmic point of view comes from the way we've constructed our ego, from the time we're young, and by the time we begin functioning in society, or trying to function in society, which is for many of us when we went to school or when we had some kind of socialization process. When that happens, we immediately start to put things together in a way that help us function. And this is referred to as ego. And over time, everything that comes into our experience or our understanding, we try to figure it out from what we already know. So we construct a way of thinking about reality. This is called ego. But if we think of, and he's talking about water here in the 10 directions, the 10 directions are north and south and east and west and up and down and in between, all of them, infinitely, going infinitely. So not thinking of the world or the universe or the cosmos in a conceptual way, but in in the 10 direction Dharma world, I always say that means going in all directions infinitely. So when the water of the 10 directions is seen in the 10 directions means that we see water not only from our tunnel vision, but from our but beyond our particular karmic point of view. We naturally see each thing from my point of view from this side, otherwise we cannot see it at all. This is the origin of dichotomy. And when we create, and then we create even more separations. We separate things we want from things we don't, the desirable from the undesirable, and the valuable from the worthless. And that's what I was talking about the other day. A little while ago, how quickly we judge when we're sitting on the cushion. You know, we have the experience of letting go, but then, you know, we notice that we're thinking too much, and that moment of noticing it is letting go. But then maybe we say, I'm thinking too much. What should I do about this? And then we're thinking more. But that moment of letting go, we don't really recognize because it's not familiar to us, so we judge it as not real. But the more we have that experience, the more that experience becomes real. And then that experience, we linger in that experience a little bit longer. And you find this in Sesshin, you know, people in Minnesota used to talk about on the third day of Sesshin, the third day, it gets easier. And I thought, how can that be if it hurts so much the first 2 days? You know? Or how can it be when I go through so much mental anguish the first 2 days? But my theory about that is just, you know, you're kind of tired by the third day. So that letting go actually starts to work. And so we have this experience on the third day of Sesshin. And still, I mean, the same kind of stuff is going through our mind, but we aren't quite as engaged in it because we're just kind of tired of it, too tired to do that much thinking about it. And as the Sesshin goes on, it becomes more and more, less and less of a hold on us. We don't notice this happening, by the way. In those Sesshins, I've noticed that when I've gotten to the point where I realize when it feels like nothing is happening, I remember that after the Sesshin, there's always so much information about that I gained through that Sesshin about myself. So it's not about myself in relation to life. So he's talking, let's see. So we see things, the origin of dichotomy, and then we create even more separations. We separate the things we want from the things we don't. That the things that are desirable from the undesirable and the valuable from the worthless. Then we want to get this side and push away that side. That's how we create samsara. Samsara is the cycle of suffering that we continue in life. We try to live on one side alone. When we see with karmic consciousness, we are the subject and things are objects. And this is how he describes nama rupa, name and form. Naturally, then, we have preferences. But when Dogen says the water of the 10 directions is seen from the 10 directions, he means not seeing from a particular position. Seeing in the 10 directions, there's no separation between the person who is seeing and the water that is seen. Water is seeing water. This is a completely different perspective. This is the thing that fascinates me so much about Zazen, is we are actually seeing our mind. We're just sitting quietly. We are actually seeing what our mind does, you know, and that's unusual, you know, because most of the time our mind is so engaged in what it's doing that we aren't seeing what our mind is doing. So it's a kind of a great opportunity. You know, and Katagiri Roshi used to say, you know, seeing what our mind is doing is like our eyes seeing our eyes. You know, we can't because they're our eyes. But somehow it's happening in Zazen. When we see with karmic consciousness, we are the subject and things are the object. So that's the attachment there. We have preferences, but when Dogen says that water is of the 10 directions, is seen in the 10 directions, he means not seeing from a particular position, seeing from the 10 directions. There's no separation between the person who is seeing and the water that is seen. Water is seeing water. When we have a drought, we want to have rain. In ancient times, people prayed to the dragon gods for rain, and yet, if the rain continues for many days with flooding, we hate rain and pray for it to end. Rain is simply rain. Depending on conditions, sometimes we love it and sometimes we hate it. But rain itself has nothing to do with the dichotomy of our like and dislike. From the very beginning, we are actually part of the myriad dharmas, the spring water. It's always coming up. Katagiri Roshi talks about it. I got it. Where's my quotes from Katagiri Roshi? He said, the ground of your life, this is Katagiri Roshi, my teacher, the ground of your life is unfathomable, but fresh water is always there. If you want it, adjust your body and mind water. Body and mind water immediately comes up from the ground. Water, there's a comma in the wrong place here, so that's why I'm reading this wrong. If you want it, if you want to touch the ground of your life, the spring, he talks about it a lot as spring water just coming up. That's what spring water does. So what he says is, if you want it, adjust your body and mind. Water immediately comes up from the ground. And I always, I have a sense of this in terms of, wanting to do something that seems impossible. Like starting Great Tree, I always talk about that too. I always thought, okay, all I have to do is get my own practice together and it will happen very naturally. And in the end, it did, but there was always that little part of me that said, but maybe it won't. Maybe I need to do something else. Maybe, and this is, this comes up for me because as we've been doing all the planning for the mountain seat ceremony, and there are so many moving pieces, and so many people coming, and some coming for 3 or 4 days, and rehearsals and ceremonies and things we have not done before. Not to mention cleaning the property, and it seems so overwhelming. It's like, how can this possibly happen? But there's this kind of, I guess you'd call it faith. There's this kind of recognition that it's a very important thing. And, I see as we all kind of start to pull together to make things start to happen, there's things that happen that we don't expect. When we work together, just working together is a very powerful experience that takes us to a different awareness, and so it seems like, oh my gosh, this is impossible. How are we going to do this? This is just a big deal, and yet looking towards it, I think all we have to do is just keep taking one step at a time, and even if it's not the kind of perfection that we imagine, there's some other kind of perfection. The spring water just comes up and feeds us in ways that we never even imagined. So Katagiri Roshi says, the ground of your life is unfathomable, but fresh water is always there. If you want it, adjust your body and mind. Water immediately comes up from the ground. And there's another quote, and I don't have the context for this, but original energy of the whole world, the boundless and compassionate energy of being, which is constantly coming up from deep in the ground like spring water. And this is an interesting thing, and this kind of relates to what I was talking about not seat ceremony. To keep discipline is to take good care of your life, accepting full responsibility to keep the water pure for all beings. That is why in human culture there are rules. For example, in the tea ceremony, there are rules for how to hold a teacup and how to hold the tea. If you practice tea ceremony, you must act smoothly without thinking. Then the clear water of no mind appears. In Zazen practice, there are also lots of rules. By following these rules, you can reach the final stage of no mind, where you are fully alive from moment to moment. And this is really, this discipline is really, just kind of putting things into order. And that putting things into order, on the one hand, it takes our intellectual thinking, but on the other hand, it takes our spiritual practice, our grounding, whatever that is, however we ground ourselves. Because grounding is not really something solid. It's something movable. It's something that recognizes when we have to shift or when we have to look at things differently, when things are falling apart. How do we take the next step? It's the discipline, that the container that keeps things moving in a particular direction. And that's a value of ceremonies too. We noticed that when we were out in LA for that big precept ceremony that lasted, how long did it last? 5 days? Was it 5 days? Well, I was there for 7, I guess, because we had to do rehearsals and get organized and things ahead of time. And we were constantly saying, what are we supposed to do in this ceremony? What are we supposed to do in this ceremony? It was a constant effort of trying to kind of get it right, and get it. But when the ceremony actually happened, it didn't matter whether there were flaws or not. It came from a deeper place. It came from our aspiration. And what the container did, not just the container of people, but the container of the ceremony itself, is it brought up that spring water. It helped us to say, beyond how I feel, and I think we all had at least one meltdown during those 5 days. I had a couple, but beyond what I'm feeling, beyond my thinking I can do this or not do this, I will do it. I will somehow make it happen. And when we do that, that's that water. That's that flowing of the water. That's that touching, experiencing the water of life. And I figured out, I was trying to find out what's the thread here. And I don't know if I really know what the thread is, but I think the real thread for me at this point is seeing water here as an expression of the impermanence of life. And also the interconnectedness of all things. And I'm going to read 2 more quotes. Oh, it's 11:01. I better quit. I'll just quit there. We need to have some announcements.
Oh, yes. Okay. So lots of things going on in just a minute. Probably most important for all the people here is we need volunteers for the mountain seat ceremony. There's a lot of things that need to get done. So I've sent out like a sign-up sheet where you can sign up for different types of jobs and things like that. So yeah, definitely look out for that again.
Are you having trouble hearing this?
Yeah. Okay, let me get a little bit closer to the microphone. Hello, can you hear me better? Is that better? Okay. Well, a lot of this is in-person stuff, so anyway, but yes, so look out for the volunteer sign-up form. There's all different kinds of things that you can do. And if you're not local, there's a lot of ways that you can support financially. There's a lot of projects that we have to do. So any way that you can support would be awesome and appreciated. And then we're also having some study groups going on right now. So Genjo is hosting a mindful politics study group. And you can join on Zoom, you can join in person. We are following a book, but you don't necessarily have to read it. So if you're interested in getting involved with that, you can send me an email at info@greattreetemple.org, or you can just show up Wednesday evenings at 6:30 and bring your friends. You can sign up for the May and June practice periods too. There are mini practice periods. So you can still sign up for those.
Right, and the May practice period is basically committing to the, we have a short period of zazen like on Saturdays beforehand, and then we have a discussion. We're going to continue this discussion of the Mountain Zen Water Sutra. I think we'll make it to chapter 2 by May, because we're taking it in very small segments.
And then I guess last thing is next Saturday, our beloved Chimio is speaking. So come next Saturday. The title of her talk is Cool Water, Warm Heart.
Oh, so she's talking about water too.
I guess water's the
thing.
thing today. Yeah, I think that's kind of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Family meditation on Sunday next weekend.
Next
weekend,
Sunday,
yeah,
yes,
the
next
27th family meditation. If anybody has, well, everybody's got a family. You don't have to bring kids to just come. You're a family. Okay, good, thank you. Now we'll give back the merit. So anything you've understood today, just throw it away, okay? Just give it to the universe. May the merit of this practice
May the merit of this practice
benefit all beings
benefit all beings
and bring peace.
and bring peace.
I'm gonna do 3 prostrations and then we'll have the exit bells.